Hello and welcome back to Tech Writing. Today we're going to talk about designing documents. This presentation is a little bit longer, but bear with me and we will get through it together. So there are some goals that you should keep in mind when you are designing documents. And these goals include things like trying to make a good impression on readers, trying to help readers understand the structure and the hierarchy of the information in your document, trying to help readers find the information that they need, and quickly, if you can do so, trying to help readers understand that information, because it's not enough for them to just find it. They need to be able to process it, and then doing what you can to try to help readers remember that information. There are also some principles of design that we're going to go over, and these will help you in designing your document. This first one is proximity, how close items appear to be towards each other. And if document design isn't something that you're familiar with, these things may seem kind of random or arbitrary, but they are really important in understanding how our brains process information and how to structure documents so that you can meet all of the goals. The next one up here is alignment. This is where items appear on the page in relation to the vertical or the horizontal axis. Then you have repetition. This is the number of times an item appears in a document. And contrast. This is the difference in appearances, usually in reference to color, between two or more items. So here's an example of contrast. We see that there's blue and orange on this. The runner's leggings are a really bright color, which sort of contrasts with the blue background, which is a more dull shade of blue, and it helps sort of, the image stand out. And it's also something that your eyes are going to be immediately drawn to. Here's proximity and repetition. Up at the top, we can see these four logos. They're evenly spaced. They look like, it's four pieces of information that you might check out, and the way that they sort of repeat the format, it helps us sort of understand what is going on here. And then this is alignment. Alignment has to do with where things are on the page. We can see that this is structured in paragraph form, and our brain sort of knows what to do with this. So when you're planning to design a document, there's a couple of things that you're going to want to do to start out with. The first one is to analyze your audience and purpose. Who's going to be interacting with this document, and what do you hope the document does? The second thing that you're going to do is determine your resources. What information do you have? What programs do you have? How long do you have? Who's going to be working on this with you? Answering all of those questions will help you figure out what you have at hand to design this document. When you are creating documents for multicultural resources, there's some things that you will want to consider. The paper size, the typeface preferences, this is like the font that you're using. Color preferences, colors don't mean the same thing in all cultures. And text direction. Obviously in English, we read from left to right, from top to bottom, but this isn't necessarily the case in all languages. So once again, thinking about your resources, what is the schedule? How much time do you have to do this? Think about money. Are you going to be able to afford professional designers and print shops, or maybe online content developers? Is this something that you're doing by yourself? Is this something that you're going to be paying for a program for? Just think about what is going to go into that. And then Lastly, equipment. Do you have graphics and web software, layout programs, color printers? How are you going to be sharing this document? There are some design elements that are in print documents that you want to consider. The size of the document, and this includes everything from how big, like physically, your document is, how many pages it has, what kind of paper you're using. You're going to think about bindings. Is this something that's going to go like in a loose leaf binder, or a spiral binder? Is it going to have traditional book binding, that sort of things? And then what are you going to use as navigational aids? Is there going to be page numbers or icons? How are the pages going to be colored, and is that going to help your readers navigate what you have created? You also have to think about your page layout. This is going to include page grids. This goes over where you're going to put what on your page, as well as white space. I know when we talked about resumes, we talked about how much white space to leave. A document that is full from left to right, top to bottom, is going to be visually overwhelming to look at, and it's possibly going to cause your readers to disengage from what you have presented them. So thinking about the appropriate level of white space, and then columns. A lot of times when you pick up a magazine or a print newspaper, it's written in columns because the short lines of text actually helps us skim and read information. So let's talk about margins. This has to do with that white space that we just talked about. So to limit the amount of information on the page, you are going to use margins. This makes the document easier to read and easier to use. This is also important if you are planning on binding your document, and allows readers to see the page without covering up any text. And then, of course, it also provides a neat frame around the type or the text or whatever information you have on the page. So let's talk about some advantages of that multi-column design. So the text is going to be easier to read because lines are shorter. It usually allows you to fit more information on the page, and columns enable you to use the principle of repetition to sort of create a visual pattern. So a lot of times if you have quite a bit of text, you might want to include columns in your design. Now let's talk about typography. So this is like the fonts that you're using. This has to do with your typeface, your type families. Case, is it written in uppercase or lowercase letters? Does it matter? A lot of times, especially when we're dealing in digital environments, anything that's written in all uppercase represents like yelling or screaming. So you want to think about, am I writing it in sentence case? Am I writing it all in lowercase? Am I writing it all in uppercase? Think about the type size. You want it to be readable but not obtrusive. How long are your lines? How spaced out are your lines? And what type of justification are you using? In academic writing, all of these choices are made for you. They are set by something like MLA or APA style. When you are creating business and technical documents, you will have to make all of these choices for your documents. So different types of typefaces serve different purposes. There are 3 typefaces or fonts right here on this screen. The first one, French script. You're not going to see this in a technical document. It's too ornate and it's too difficult to read, but maybe you'll see it in like a wedding invitation or a formal announcement, something like that. The next one is Times New Roman. This font is something that you're going to see like in newspapers as well as in technical documents. And then the last one up here is a more modern, high-tech looking font, and a lot of times you will see this in like titles and headings in technical documents. There are also two main categories of typeface, serif and sans serif, which just means without serif. The serifs are the little notches on the outsides of letters. So we can see that first N on the screen is a serif font because it has those little notches, and then the sans serif does not have them. Typically, sans serif fonts are easier to read for the majority of people. Then you're also going to have different variations within a particular font. So this is all Helvetica, but we can see some of it's bold, some of it's italic, some of it's light. So just paying attention to what you're using and why you're using it and how it works for your readers is important. A document written all in bold is sometimes difficult to read, but bolding just certain words or phrases can help draw our attention to them. And then you also want to make sure that your uppercase or lowercase is readable. So there are individual variations in lowercase words. In uppercase words, all the letters tend to be the same size. It is easier for our brain to read words that are written in lowercase or what's called sentence case, which is where you capitalize the first letter of each sentence and proper nouns, but everything else is in lowercase. When we see words like this, a lot of times our brains are able to read more efficiently and more quickly. It's because we're not actually looking at every single letter in the word. We are looking for clues in the word. Are there any letters that go above the line or below the line? Approximately how big is the word? What does it start with? And what does it end with? In uppercase, that's more difficult to do because we lose some of those clues. So you're having to look at each individual letter to determine what word is made up there. And then font size. This is just kind of a general rule on what font sizes you should use when you are creating documents. So if we're talking about footnotes, usually an 8 or 9 point type. If you're looking at body text, 10, 11, or 12. Headings are usually about 14. Indexes are just slightly smaller than whatever your body text is. Titles, like on your page, are bigger. And then if you're using something like PowerPoint or Google Slides or even Canva to create a presentation, usually those fonts are like 24 to 36 point type. And this is because usually people are going to be reading them from a further distance, so you want to make sure that they are big enough. So that is mostly print documents. Let's talk about some principles of design for online documents. The first one that I have up here is using design to emphasize important information. You are going to be able to direct your reader's eyes to particular parts of your document. So pay attention to how you're using design to emphasize what information you want your reader to know. It's also important to create informative headers and footers. What information is included. This helps when they're scrolling through a large document and they need to find information quickly. You want to help readers navigate the document. A lot of times, if you're looking at an online document, there's menus and there's contents and all of that to help readers navigate. You also want to think about what sort of extra features readers might need. So for example, if something is a really long online document, a lot of times there's a little button that kind of travels with you as you scroll throughout the document that just says back to the top. That way you don't have to scroll all the way back to the top. You also usually want to help readers connect with others. What sort of social media or websites do you want to provide? You want to make sure that your design is accessible for all readers. One of the things that is sort of important to remember is that when you make documents accessible for people with disabilities, it helps everybody out. So make sure that your documents are readable, and then also think about those multicultural readers. What do you need to include or do to help make sure that everybody who's reading your document has all of the information that they need? So let's talk about emphasizing important information. Decide what types of information are most essential to your audience. As the document creator, this is your job. What is it that you want people to walk away with? Give navigational features clear, informative headings. There's nothing worse than trying to navigate a website that isn't properly designed, and you're like, I'm sure this information is on here somewhere, but I have no idea how to get to it. You don't ever want your reader to have that experience. And then think about those design principles and adhere to them. Those design principles are there for a reason, so make sure that you're sticking to them. So there's some things that you can do to make your site easy to navigate. Include a sitemap or an index. This is a separate page that lists every single part of the website. And a lot of times, if you have a lot of information on your website or your online document, this can be really helpful to your readers. If you have long pages of text, use a table of contents that has links that jump to certain sections. Help your readers get back to the top of long pages. Every single page should also include a link to the home page. And then the last thing I have up here is to include textual navigational links at the bottom of the page. So once your reader reaches the bottom of your text, where should they go now? What should they do? How are they going to navigate the rest of your online document? So this is an example of what a site map looks like. We can see that on this website we have some options. We can click on products, support, applications, and about the company. So underneath each one of those options is all of the subcategories, and we can quickly see every single piece of information, or at least every single section that is included on this website. So if we're looking for a particular thing, this can help get us there very quickly. So here is an example of what a table of contents might look like. We have some categories as well as some subcategories, and each one of these links are something that you would be able to click on to go directly to that information. So here's some extra features that you might include in an online document. Frequently asked question page. And sometimes we don't know right off the bat what the frequently asked questions are going to be. But if you get the same question over and over again from your audience or your reader, answer it in a frequently asked question page. And a lot of times we can anticipate what readers might want to know. So a lot of well-designed documents are going to have an FAQ page. You also might include a search page or a search engine. This allows your reader to search through your document for particular keywords or phrases that will help them go directly to what they are looking for. If you used resources or you know of resources that might be helpful, include them in your site. And then a printable version of your site is helpful, especially if there's a lot of technical information there. I know a lot of times if I am browsing, I will click the little button on my iPhone or my laptop that gives me a reader version of the site. And then that makes it printable for me. So pay attention to what the printable version of your website is going to look like. And then here are some suggestions for helping your readers connect with others. Direct your readers to your organization's discussion forums or blogs if you have them. If your organization has social media sites, direct your readers there. And then if there's interactive features of your organization's website, you can direct your readers there as well. So, accessibility guidelines. There are some really great tools out there in pretty much every website generator, document generator, all of those that can help you sort of measure the accessibility of what you've created. But there's some general rules that you always want to make sure that you're following. Provide alternative text. Alternative text explains what's in photos or images or drawings, charts, graphs, that sort of thing. For people who are visually impaired, alternative text will explain what is included. Make sure that your document is structured appropriately in terms of headings, subheadings, titles, that sort of thing. This helps people who use readers to get the information off a document, or electronic readers know what information to emphasize. Make sure that if you are using tables, charts, or graphs, that you're providing headers. Make sure that all users can complete and submit all of the forms that you're using. If you're including links, make sure they make sense out of context. You want to make sure that any link or button that your user or reader clicks on is going to be connected in some way and a logical jump from what you're doing. And then lastly, make sure that you caption all pictures and use closed captioning or transcripts for all media. You want to make sure that the non-HTML content is also accessible. You want to make sure that your users are allowed to skip repetitive elements on the page. Do not reply on color alone to create meaning. You have to use specific wording and syntax and text to create meaning, because not all readers are going to be able to pick up on the colors that you're using for several reasons. Maybe they're visually impaired, maybe they are colorblind, or maybe that color means something different in their culture than it does in yours. Make sure all of your content is clearly written and easy to read. And lastly, think about what are the industry standards in the industry in which you're creating this technical document, and design to those standards. So, if we're designing for multicultural audiences, make sure that you're using common words, not specific synonyms or anything like that. And you want to keep your sentences and your paragraphs short. Avoid idioms, both verbal and visual, that might be confusing. And consider creating an entirely different version of your site in another language, especially if you know you will have a large number of users who have another language as their first language. So let's talk about some things that you should do to help design a simple site. Keep the text short. You may have a lot to say, but realistically, your readers are not going to read every word that you put on your website, so keep it short and to the point. Chunk information. If things are related, you can maybe pair them up together, and make the text as simple as possible. Make sure that you are giving clear, informative links. A good rule to follow is to structure your sentence as if there were no links in your text. Make sure that if you do include a link, you are indicating what information the linked page contains, and use standard colors for text links. You know, a lot of times we want to make our document stand out or use specific color palettes, but you kind of want to follow the standard color rules for links. This helps your reader know, hey, this is a hyperlink, it's not just underlined text. If you have questions over any of the design elements that we talked about today, reach out, let me know. I also have some resources for you in our online classroom. And then we're going to be talking more about those design principles coming up in a later lecture.